daughter was watching her parents' wedding video, found a shocking detail. The dust motes danced in the afternoon sunlight streaming through the attic window as Emma pushed aside another box of Christmas decorations. She'd promised her mother she'd help organize the cluttered space, but after 3 hours of sorting through decades of accumulated memories, her enthusiasm was waning. Just as she was about to call it quits, her hand brushed against something hard and rectangular beneath a pile of old blankets. "What's this?" she muttered, pulling out a black plastic case. The faded label, written in her mother's neat handwriting, read, "Mom and Dad's Wedding 1994. Emma's heart quickened with interest. She'd seen plenty of wedding photos before, but never a video of her parents' special day. Downstairs, Laura, her mother, was preparing dinner, humming softly to herself as she always did. Emma could smell the familiar aroma of her signature lasagna wafting up through the floorboards. She decided the cleaning could wait. This discovery was too intriguing to ignore. In her bedroom, Emma blew dust off the ancient VHS tape and inserted it into the player she'd bought at a vintage store last year, a purchase her friends had mercilessly teased her about. "Who even watches VHS tapes anymore?" they'd asked. Now, she felt vindicated. The screen flickered to life, and Emma settled onto her bed, hugging a pillow to her chest. The footage was grainy, but the joy radiating from the scenes was crystal clear. Her mother, young and radiant in her white dress, looked like something out of a fairy tale. Her father, Daniel, couldn't take his eyes off his bride, his smile so wide it seemed permanent. But it wasn't her parents who caught Emma's attention. It was the woman in the lavender dress. She was everywhere in the footage, helping Laura with her veil, giving an emotional speech at the reception, dancing with both the bride and groom. Her presence was magnetic. She had the kind of laugh that made everyone around her smile. The cameraman seemed drawn to her too, frequently capturing her animated expressions and the way she fussed over Laura like a protective sister. "Who is she?" Emma wondered aloud, leaning closer to the screen. As the maid of honor, this woman, Lillian, according to the speeches, should have been a significant figure in her parents' lives. Yet in 23 years, Emma had never heard her name mentioned, never seen her in any family photos, never had her presence acknowledged at any holiday gatherings or family reunions. The mystery deepened as Emma continued watching. Halfway through the reception, something strange happened. The camera panned across the room, showing guests dancing and celebrating. Lillian was sitting at the head table, her expression suddenly serious as she leaned close to Laura, whispering something in her ear. The next time the camera swept past that spot, mere minutes later, Lillian's chair was empty. Emma rewound the tape, watching the sequence again and again. There was no footage of Lillian leaving, no goodbye waves, no hugs. She simply vanished from the celebration as if she'd never been there at all. Pausing the video on a close-up of Lillian's face, Emma studied the woman who had apparently been her mother's best friend. There was something hauntingly familiar about her features. The way her eyes crinkled when she smiled, the slight tilt of her head when she listened to someone speaking. Emma couldn't shake the feeling that she'd seen her somewhere before, but that was impossible. Wasn't it? The sound of her mother's voice floating up the stairs snapped Emma out of her reverie. "Emma! Dinner's ready! Coming!" she called back, but her mind was already racing with questions. Why had her mother never mentioned Lillian? What had happened at the reception to make her disappear so suddenly? And why did Emma feel such a strong connection to this mysterious woman from the past? As she headed downstairs, Emma's phone buzzed with a text. It was from her best friend, Maya. "Found something weird in that genealogy research you asked for. Call me when you can." Emma stared at the message, her heart pounding. She'd asked Maya, an amateur genealogist, to look into her family history for a school project weeks ago. Could there be a connection? The timing seemed too perfect to be coincidental. The smell of lasagna grew stronger as Emma descended the stairs, but her appetite had vanished. Instead, her stomach churned with a mixture of excitement and apprehension. Her mother's humming had stopped, and when Emma entered the kitchen, she found Laura standing still at the counter, staring out the window with an unreadable expression. "Mom?" Emma said softly. Laura jumped slightly, turning to face her daughter with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. There you are! How's the attic coming along? Emma hesitated, the weight of the discovery heavy in her chest. Should she mention the video? Ask about Lillian? Something in her mother's stance, the slight tension in her shoulders, the way her hands gripped the counter, made Emma pause. It's going well, she said instead, helping to set the table. But as they sat down to eat, Emma couldn't stop thinking about the woman in the lavender dress, and the secrets that seemed to swirl around her like the dust motes in the attic air. Something told her that uncovering the truth about Lillian would change everything, and she wasn't sure if she was ready for what she might find. That night, Emma barely slept. The image of Lillian's face kept appearing in her dreams, intertwined with fragments of the wedding video and the mysterious text from Maya. By morning, she knew she couldn't keep her discovery to herself any longer. She found her mother in the garden, tending to her prized roses, a Sunday morning ritual that hadn't changed in years. The early light cast a gentle glow over Laura's face, making her look younger, almost like the bride in the video. Emma took a deep breath, clutching her phone with Maya's text still unopened. "Mom," she began, trying to keep her voice casual. "I found something interesting in the attic yesterday." She paused, watching her mother's hands carefully prune a stem. "Your wedding video." Laura's scissors slipped, nearly cutting through a healthy bloom. She recovered quickly, but Emma noticed a slight tremor in her hands. "Oh? I didn't know we still had that old thing." "Yeah, it was enlightening." Emma moved closer, positioning herself where her mother couldn't avoid her gaze. "Who's Lillian?" The name dropped like a stone into still water. Laura's entire body tensed, and for a moment she seemed to stop breathing. When she finally looked up, her expression was a complex mixture of emotions Emma had never seen before: fear, sadness, and something that looked almost like guilt. "Oh, she was an old friend," Laura said quickly, returning to her roses with unnecessary focus. "We lost touch after the wedding." "Lost touch?" Emma pressed, her suspicion growing. "Mom, she was your maid of honor. In the video, you two looked closer than sisters. How does someone that important just disappear?" Laura's pruning shears snapped shut with finality. "Sometimes people grow apart, Emma. It happens." She stood, brushing dirt from her gardening pants. "Would you like some breakfast?" "I was thinking of making pancakes." But Emma wasn't ready to let it go. "I want to see the wedding albums." Her mother froze halfway to the house. They're not very well organized." "Maybe another time? I'll help you look," Emma insisted, following her inside. She watched as her mother's shoulders slumped slightly in defeat. The albums were kept in the living room bookshelf, bound in leather and carefully labeled by year. Emma pulled out 1994 and settled onto the couch, her mother hovering nervously nearby. Page after page of carefully preserved photographs told the story of her parents' wedding day, the ceremony, the reception, the dancing, the cake cutting. But something was wrong. Lillian wasn't in any of them. Emma flipped through the pages again, more frantically this time. The maid of honor appeared in none of the professional photographs. Even in the candid shots, where she should have been visible in the background, there was no sign of the woman in the lavender dress. "This doesn't make sense," Emma muttered, reaching for another album. "She was there. I saw her in the video." Laura sat down heavily beside her daughter. "Emma, please, some things are better left in the past." "But why?" Emma turned to face her mother, frustration building. "What happened? Why is she edited out of every photo? Why does no one talk about her?" Before Laura could answer, Emma's phone buzzed. Maya's name flashed on the screen, followed by another text. "You need to see this. Your mom's yearbook. There's something weird about it." Emma's heart raced as she opened her messages. Maya had sent a photo of a high school yearbook page, dated 1990. There, in black and white, was a teenage version of her mother, smiling broadly next to a girl who could only be Lillian. The caption read, "Laura Anderson and Lillian Mitchell, best friends forever, sisters by choice." But what caught Emma's attention wasn't the photo itself, It was what someone had done to it. Lillian's face had been carefully scratched out with what looked like a razor blade. "Mom," Emma said slowly, turning her phone to show the image. "Why would someone do this?" Laura's face went pale. She reached for the phone with trembling hands, staring at the defaced photograph as if seeing a ghost. "Where did you get this?" "Maya's been helping me research our family history. She found your old yearbook in the library archives." Emma watched her mother carefully. "Every photo of Lillian has been destroyed like this. Every single one." Suddenly, Laura stood up, her movements jerky and uncertain. "I need to make a phone call," she announced, heading for the stairs. "Please, Emma, give me some time." But as her mother retreated, Emma noticed something fall from between the pages of one of the albums, a small, folded piece of paper that had been hidden in the binding. She picked it up, unfolding it carefully. It was a newspaper clipping, dated just 3 days after the wedding. The headline made her shocked. "Local woman missing, police seek information." Below was a photograph of Lillian, smiling the same warm smile Emma had seen in the wedding video. The article was brief, mentioning that Lillian Mitchell had last been seen leaving a wedding reception, and that her car had been found abandoned at the train station. Emma's hands shook as she read the final line. "Family members report receiving a brief note stating I need to go away for a while. Please don't look for me. Police are treating the disappearance as suspicious." From upstairs, she could hear her mother's voice, tense and whispered. "Dad, we have a problem." Emma found the video. Yes, that video. She knows about Lillian. The pieces were starting to form a darker picture, one that made Emma's stomach churn. She glanced at her phone, where Maya had sent another message. "There's more. Your grandfather's name keeps coming up in the police reports from that time. Want me to keep digging?" Emma looked at the stairs, where her mother's hushed conversation continued, then back at the newspaper clipping in her hand. Whatever had happened to Lillian, it was becoming clear that her disappearance was about much more than just growing apart. And somehow, her own family was at the center of it all. After her mother's suspicious phone call, Emma waited until the house fell quiet. Laura had retreated to her room with a migraine, something that hadn't happened since Emma's father passed away 3 years ago. The timing felt too convenient to be coincidental. Back in her room, Emma pulled out her laptop and connected the VHS player, determined to digitize the wedding footage. If there were clues about what happened to Lillian, she needed to be able to analyze every frame without wearing out the tape. As she worked, her phone buzzed with updates from Maya, each one more disturbing than the last. "Found police interviews from 1994. Your grandfather was questioned 3 times. There's a sealed file in the courthouse records. Emma, I think I found Lillian's diary. It was submitted as evidence." Emma's hands trembled as she started the video transfer. While it processed, she called Maya. "What do you mean, her diary?" Emma whispered, conscious of the thin walls. "It was logged as evidence but never released," Maya explained. "The weird thing is, all records of it just stop. Like someone made it disappear from the system. But I found a reference to it in an old newspaper article. The police had it, Emma. They were treating this as a potential crime until suddenly, they weren't." Emma glanced at her screen, where the wedding video was now playing silently. "Can you get access to it?" "Already trying. My aunt works at the courthouse. Give me a few days." After hanging up, Emma focused on the footage. This time, she wasn't watching as a curious daughter, she was looking for evidence. She created a timeline, noting every appearance of Lillian throughout the day. Something about her earlier observations had been nagging at her, and now she knew why. Lillian's behavior changed dramatically as the reception progressed. In the early footage, Lillian was radiant, exactly what you'd expect from a maid of honor. But around 8:45 p.m., according to the timestamp, everything shifted. Emma noticed it first in Lillian's posture. She became tense, her smile forced. She kept glancing toward the corner of the reception hall, where Emma's grandfather, Richard Anderson, stood with a group of men Emma didn't recognize. "What did you see?" Emma murmured, zooming in as much as the grainy footage would allow. At 9:13 p.m., Lillian excused herself from the head table and walked to the ladies' room. When she returned 7 minutes later, her eyes were red. She'd been crying, but trying to hide it. That's when she leaned over to whisper something to Laura. Emma had watched this moment before, but now she tried something different. She plugged in her gaming headphones, the ones with noise-canceling capabilities, and turned the volume up to maximum. Behind the music and chatter barely audible, she could make out fragments. "Have to go, not safe. I'm sorry, protect you." The words sent chills down Emma's spine. But it was what happened next that truly shocked her. As Lillian stood to leave, she walked past Emma's grandfather. The camera caught a split-second interaction, Richard Anderson gripping Lillian's arm, speaking through clenched teeth. The audio was clearer this time. "Make it look natural. Don't make a scene." Emma sat back, her heart pounding. She rewound and played it again, transcribing every word she could catch. Then she noticed something she'd missed before, a small envelope, passed from Lillian to one of the wedding servers just before she left. The server quickly tucked it into her apron pocket. Grabbing her phone, Emma texted Maya. "Need help identifying someone. Wedding server, young blonde. Would have been around 20 in 1994. While waiting for a response, Emma continued analyzing the footage. She noticed other details now, the way her grandfather's friends positioned themselves near the exits after Lillian left, the subtle nods they exchanged, the way they stayed until the very end of the reception as if making sure she didn't return. But the most chilling discovery came when Emma focused on the background of a particular shot. In the reflection of a window, she could see the parking lot. A dark car was idling there, its headlights off. The timestamp showed 9:30 p.m., exactly when Lillian would have been leaving. Her phone buzzed. Maya had sent a photograph of a woman in her late 40s. Her name is Sarah Thompson. Still lives in town. Works at the public library. Emma's pulse quickened. She knew that library, had spent countless hours there doing homework. More importantly, she knew that name. Sarah Thompson was the quiet woman who always worked the reference desk, the one who had helped Emma with her school projects countless times. The same Sarah Thompson who, according to the wedding video, had been handed an envelope by Lillian moments before she vanished. Emma checked the time, 9:45 p.m. The library would be closed now, but she knew Sarah worked the morning shift. Tomorrow, she would have questions for the former wedding server. But first, she needed to understand more about what she was dealing with. Turning back to the footage, Emma noticed one final detail that made her shocked. At the very end of the tape, long after most guests had left, the camera had been left running on a tripod. It caught a conversation between her grandfather and one of his friends. "It's done. She took the deal. And if she changes her mind? She won't. She knows what's at stake." The tape ended abruptly there, leaving Emma with more questions than answers. What deal? What was at stake? And why did her grandfather seem so satisfied with Lillian's departure? A floorboard creaked behind her, and Emma whirled around to find her mother standing in the doorway, her face ashen. "I heard the video playing," Laura said softly. "I suppose you want the truth." Emma nodded, her throat tight. "All of it." Laura moved to sit on the bed, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. "It's not what you think," she began. "Lillian didn't just disappear. She was given a choice, by your grandfather. But what happened next?" Laura's voice broke. "What happened next was never part of the plan." Outside, a car door slammed, and footsteps crunched on the gravel driveway. Laura's eyes widened in fear. "He's here," she whispered. "Your grandfather." "Emma, quickly, hide the tape. He can't know you've seen it. He can't know you've figured it out." But as Emma scrambled to disconnect the VHS player, she couldn't shake the feeling that it was already too late. Whatever secrets the tape had revealed, whatever truth lay behind Lillian's disappearance, she was now entangled in a mystery that had been waiting 29 years to be solved. Emma's hands shook as she shoved the VHS tape under her mattress, her mother's warning still ringing in her ears. The sound of heavy footsteps on the stairs made her pulse race. Her grandfather had always moved with the same deliberate, authoritative stride that had commanded boardrooms for decades. "Laura?" Richard Anderson's voice boomed through the hallway. "We need to talk." "Coming, Dad," Laura called back, her voice steadier than her trembling hands would suggest. She turned to Emma, whispering urgently, "Stay here. Whatever you hear, don't come down." As her mother left the room, Emma pressed her ear to the floor, straining to hear the conversation below. But the voices were too muffled, the words indistinct. Frustrated, she pulled out her phone to text Maya, only to find a new message waiting. "Emergency. Sarah Thompson left something for you at the library. Says it's about Lillian. Must be picked up in person before tomorrow." Emma's heart leaped. The library was closed, but she knew Sarah often stayed late cataloging books. If she could just slip out. A shout from downstairs made her jump. Her grandfather's voice, angry and sharp. "You let her find the tape?" Making her decision, Emma eased open her window. The oak tree outside her room had been her secret escape route during her rebellious teenage years. It seemed fitting to use it now, at 23, in pursuit of the truth. As she climbed down, she could see three shadows through the living room curtains: her mother, her grandfather, and someone else she couldn't identify. The library was a 15-minute walk away. Emma ran it in 10, her mind racing faster than her feet. When she arrived, breathless, only one car remained in the parking lot: Sarah Thompson's faded blue Volvo. The library's front door was locked, but a soft tap on the window brought Sarah to the door. She looked exactly as she had that afternoon, but something in her expression had changed. She looked both relieved and terrified to see Emma. "I've been waiting 30 years to pass this on," Sarah said without preamble, leading Emma to the reference desk. From a locked drawer, she pulled out a thick manila envelope, yellowed with age. "Lillian gave me two things that night: a letter to give to Laura when the time was right, and instructions to keep this safe until someone came asking the right questions." Emma's hands trembled as she accepted the envelope. "Why didn't you give the letter to my mom?" Sarah's eyes darted to the windows, her voice dropping. "Because the next day, your grandfather came to see me. Made it very clear what would happen to my family if I did. I was young, scared, but I kept everything safe. Lillian knew someone would come looking eventually." Inside the envelope, Emma found several items: a handwritten letter, a small notebook that could only be Lillian's missing diary, and most surprisingly, a key with a tag attached reading, "Storage Unit 23, Central Lock and Key." The letter was dated 3 days after the wedding. "Dear Laura, by the time you read this, I'll be gone. I wanted to stay, to stand beside you as we'd always planned, but what I discovered made that impossible. Your father, Richard, isn't who you think he is. The Anderson family's wealth, their power, it's built on blood money. That night at the wedding, I overheard him talking with his associates about cleaning up loose ends. They mentioned your mother's accident 10 years ago, the one that was never properly investigated. It wasn't an accident, Laura. They finished her because she found out the truth about the family business. Your father runs more than just shipping companies. The manifests I found in his office, photos enclosed in the storage unit, show weapons and other things. The charitable foundation? It's a front for money laundering. I found proof, Laura. Real proof. When Richard caught me near his office, he gave me a choice: take a large sum of money and disappear, or have an accident like your mother. But he made one mistake: he didn't know about the evidence I'd already hidden. I took his deal to stay alive, but I couldn't leave without making sure the truth would come out someday. I'm trusting Sarah to keep this safe until someone connects the dots. Knowing you, it will be your daughter. You always said you wanted to name her Emma, after your mother. If you're reading this, Emma, and somehow I know it will be you, there's more you need to know. Your grandmother Emma didn't just find out about Richard's business, she was trying to stop it. She left her own evidence trail, one that Richard never found. The key enclosed leads to where I hid everything: your grandmother's research, my evidence, all of it. But be careful. If Richard is still alive when you find this, he's more dangerous than ever. The man I saw that night was capable of anything to protect his empire. Laura, I'm so sorry I couldn't tell you this in person. Keeping you in the dark was the only way to keep you safe. Your father would have silenced you too if he thought you knew anything. My only regret is not finding a way to take you with me. All my love. Lillian. P.S. If you need to find me, look for the Lavender House on Maple Street in Vancouver. I'll be waiting. Emma sat back, her mind reeling from the revelations. Sarah watched her carefully, then spoke softly. There's something else you should know. Your grandfather didn't just come to threaten me that day. He had people watching me for years. They're probably watching you now. As if on cue, Emma's phone buzzed with a text from Maya. Police just left my house. They were asking about you and some old case files. Something's wrong. Through the library windows, Emma noticed a black SUV pulling into the parking lot, its headlights off. Sarah's face went pale. Back door, she whispered urgently, already moving. There's a service alley. Go now! Emma clutched the envelope to her chest as she followed Sarah through the dark library. Behind them, she heard the front door opening, followed by heavy footsteps. The storage unit, Sarah said quickly as they reached the back door. Go tonight. Whatever's in there, it's what they've been afraid of all these years. It's what they're still afraid of. As Emma slipped out into the night, Sarah's final words followed her. Be careful who you trust, Emma. This goes deeper than just your family. The storage facility loomed before Emma like a fortress in the midnight darkness. Her phone had been buzzing nonstop, missed calls from her mother, texts from Maya warning about police movement in the area, and most worryingly, an unknown number that kept calling every few minutes. Unit 23 was at the far end of the complex. Emma's flashlight beam bounced off the metal doors as she counted down the numbers, constantly looking over her shoulder. The key from Lillian's envelope felt heavy in her hand, its rust suggesting decades of waiting. Just as she reached the unit, headlights swept across the facility's entrance. Emma quickly killed her flashlight and pressed herself against the cold metal door. The vehicle, another black SUV, cruised slowly past the front gate. Through the chain-link fence, she could make out two men in suits scanning the rows of storage units. The moment they passed, Emma fumbled with the key. It stuck at first, decades of disuse making it resistant, but finally turned with a loud click that seemed to echo through the silent facility. She rolled the door up just enough to slip inside, then pulled it down behind her. Her flashlight revealed a space about the size of a small bedroom, filled with boxes and filing cabinets. The air was thick with dust and the musty smell of old paper. But what caught her eye first was a large corkboard leaning against the wall, covered in photographs and newspaper clippings, all connected by red string, her grandmother Emma's investigation board. Oh my God! She whispered, moving closer. The web of connections laid out before her was staggering. Shipping manifests, bank statements, photographs of her grandfather with known criminals, and in the center, a photograph of her grandmother, the woman she'd been named after but had never met. Her phone buzzed again. This time it was a text from her mother. Where are you? Dad knows about the storage unit. Get out now. But Emma couldn't leave, not yet. She quickly began photographing everything on the corkboard, her hands shaking as she tried to capture every detail. The evidence was damning, proof of decades of criminal enterprise disguised as legitimate business, all masterminded by her grandfather. A noise outside made her freeze. Footsteps on gravel, moving closer. Emma ducked behind a filing cabinet just as a beam of light swept under the storage unit door. Her heart pounded so loudly she was sure it would give her away. The footsteps stopped right outside. Unit 23, a gruff voice said. This is it. Emma held her breath, pressing herself deeper into the shadows. Then another voice spoke, one that made her shocked. Wait. It was her father's voice. Daniel Anderson, who had supposedly died in a car accident 3 years ago. Danny, we need to move fast, the first voice urged. Your father. My father is the reason we're in this mess, Daniel snapped. He finished my wife's mother, forced her best friend to flee, and faked my death to keep me quiet when I found out. I'm done following his orders." Emma had to clamp a hand over her mouth to stifle her gasp. Her father was alive. And he knew everything? "Laura and Emma think you're dead," the other man said. "If you show yourself now." "My daughter is in there, isn't she?" Daniel's voice was closer now, right outside the door. "Emma, if you can hear me, we don't have much time. Your grandfather's men are on their way." Emma remained frozen, her mind struggling to process everything. Could she trust this voice from the dead? Through her confusion, another text came through, this one from Maya. "Found sealed court records. Your dad's accident was staged. He's been working with secret agents." That decided it. Emma stepped out from behind the filing cabinet, her flashlight beam finding her father's face through the gap under the door. He looked older, more weathered, but very much alive. "Dad?" Her voice cracked. The door rolled up, and there he stood, Daniel Anderson, somehow both a ghost and flesh at the same time. Behind him was a man holding a badge. "I'm so sorry," Daniel said, his eyes filled with tears. "I never wanted to leave you and your mother, but when I discovered what my father was doing, he threatened to finish us if you didn't disappear." Emma finished, the pieces finally clicking into place. "Just like he threatened Lillian." Daniel nodded grimly. "I've been working ever since, building a case. We're close, Emma. Really close. But now he knows we're onto him, and he's going to try to destroy everything in here." "Not everything," Emma said, pulling out her phone. "I've photographed the evidence. And I know where Lillian is." The agent stepped forward. "Ms. Anderson, your grandfather Richard is the head of one of the largest criminal enterprises we've ever investigated. Trafficking, arms dealing, decades of it, all hidden behind legitimate businesses and charity work. We've never been able to prove it because he finishes anyone who gets too close." Emma finished. "Like my grandmother." Daniel's face darkened. "Your grandmother Emma was a hero. She discovered what he was doing and tried to stop it. When she died, Lillian picked up her investigation. Then at our wedding, she found the final piece of evidence she needed, but Richard caught her. She ran to protect your mother and I. I did the same thing 3 years ago." Suddenly, multiple sets of headlights flooded the storage facility. Car doors slammed in the distance. "They're here," the agent said urgently. "Mr. Anderson, we need to move." "Wait," Emma said, grabbing her father's arm. "Mom needs to know the truth. All of it. She's been blaming herself for everything, for Lillian leaving, for your disappearance. We can't keep her in the dark anymore." Daniel hesitated, then nodded. "You're right. But first, we need to get this evidence somewhere safe. And Emma, there's something else you need to know about Lillian. She's not just your mother's best friend. She's—" Before he could finish, gunshots rang out in the darkness. The agent shoved them both inside the storage unit, slamming the door down. "Back exit," he ordered, pointing to a small door Emma hadn't noticed before. "Through the vacant unit behind this one. There's a car waiting. We've got people holding them off, but we need to move. Now." As they hurried through the back door, Emma clutched her phone with its precious photos and the letter from Lillian. Whatever her father had been about to say about Lillian would have to wait. Right now, they had to survive the night, and somehow find a way to tell her mother that everything she believed for the past 30 years had been a lie. The safe house was a modest cabin on the outskirts of town, its existence known only to select agents. Emma sat at the kitchen table, watching her mother absorb the impossible truth that her husband was alive. Laura hadn't spoken for several minutes after Daniel walked through the door. She simply held him, tears streaming down her face. "All this time," Laura finally whispered, "I thought I'd lost everyone. First Lillian, then Mom, then you. We're going to get them all back," Daniel promised, holding her hands. "Well, almost all." His eyes were sad as he thought of Emma's grandmother, the first victim of Richard Anderson's determination to keep his crimes hidden. Emma's phone buzzed, another update from Maya, who had been coordinating with the agent to track Richard's movements. "Your grandfather's been arrested. They caught him trying to board a private plane to Switzerland. It's over. But Emma knew it wasn't over. Not yet. There was still one piece of the puzzle missing, one truth still waiting to be revealed. She pulled out Lillian's letter with its Vancouver address. "We need to go," she said firmly. "Now that grandfather's in custody, it's safe. Lillian's been waiting for 30 years. The drive to Vancouver took several hours. Emma spent them studying her father's case files, finally understanding the full scope of her grandfather's crimes. Richard Anderson had built his empire on suffering. The charitable foundation had been a masterpiece of misdirection, laundering money while building a reputation for philanthropy that made him practically untouchable. But it was the newest file that held Emma's attention, the one about Lillian Mitchell. She read it 3 times, each reading making her heart beat faster as the final piece of the puzzle clicked into place. The lavender house on Maple Street was exactly as described in Lillian's letter. As they pulled up, Emma noticed the garden was full of the same roses her mother grew. A woman was tending to them, her back turned to the street. When their car doors slammed shut, she straightened up slowly, as if she'd been expecting this moment for decades. Lillian turned around, and Emma finally understood why those features in the wedding video had seemed so familiar. She had seen them every day in the mirror. "Hello, Laura," Lillian said softly, then looked at Emma with tears in her eyes. "And hello, my daughter." Laura's gasp broke the silence. "What?" Emma stepped forward, the file clutched in her hand. "Mom, Lillian isn't just your best friend. She's my biological mother. That's why grandfather wanted her gone, not just because she knew about his crimes, but because of me." Lillian nodded, pain etched on her face. "Laura and Daniel couldn't have children, a fact Richard used to torment them. When I offered to be a surrogate, we kept it secret from him. But somehow he found out. The night of the wedding, he threatened to expose everything, to use his influence to take Emma away from all of us. He said he'd rather see his only grandchild in the foster system than have her raised by someone like me. Someone from the wrong side of the tracks," Laura finished bitterly. "That's what he always called you. But I never knew. Why didn't you tell me?" "Because you would have fought him," Lillian said simply. "You would have stood by me, and he would have destroyed you too. At least this way, Emma had a chance at a normal life with 2 parents who loved her. Even if one of them had to be me watching from a distance." Emma's mind was spinning. "The library. Sarah Thompson." Lillian smiled sadly. "Sarah sent me updates about you over the years. Every school achievement, every milestone. I have an entire album of newspaper clippings about your academic awards, your sports victories. I was never far away, Emma. I just couldn't be close." Daniel stepped forward. "When I discovered Richard's crimes, I also found the truth about Emma's birth. He had all the documentation locked away as leverage. That's when I knew I had to work with the secret agents, not just to stop his criminal empire, but to protect all of us. To give us a chance at being a real family someday." Laura moved to Lillian's side, taking her hand. "We are a real family. We always have been. Everything good in Emma, her strength, her determination, her sense of justice, she gets that from both of us. And now," she squeezed Lillian's hand, "now we don't have to hide anymore." Emma looked at the 3 people before her, the mother who raised her, the mother who gave her life, and the father who sacrificed everything to protect them all. "The wedding video," she said suddenly. "That's why you kept it, isn't it, Mom? Even when grandfather ordered everything else destroyed. You wanted me to find it someday." Laura nodded. "I knew you'd be the one to put it all together. You have your grandmother's investigative spirit, Lillian's courage, and—" she smiled at Daniel, "your father's determination to uncover the truth." Lillian opened her arms, and Emma stepped into them, inhaling the familiar scent of lavender that had clung to that bridesmaid's dress so many years ago. "I have so many questions," she whispered. "We have time now," Lillian assured her. "All the time in the world." Inside the lavender house, they found 30 years of birthday cards never sent, school pictures with Emma's milestones carefully noted on the back, and a mother's love preserved in a room that had been waiting for this very day. On the wall hung a single photograph, the only one Lillian had kept from the wedding. In it, she stood beside Laura, both of them laughing, both of them touching Laura's stomach where Emma was just beginning to grow. As the sun set over Vancouver, 4 people sat in a garden full of roses, beginning the delicate work of weaving their broken pieces back into a whole. The truth had finally set them free, not just from Richard Anderson's crimes, but from the weight of secrets they'd carried for too long. And somewhere, Emma thought, her grandmother was smiling, knowing that the truth she died protecting had finally come to light, and the family she loved was whole again.